CEOs and leaders and all of you out here, listen, this is a great conversation today with Lindsay because it is about leadership. It is about really what are your values? Do you even know what they are? Does your team know what they are? Are you guys aligned? Because a lot of times what's happening is you are just having all of these different conflicting ideas of what your leadership is, the business is, left or right, up or down. And I want you guys to be successful in what you do. So, me and Lindsay hung out today and we talked about leadership. We talked about values. We talked about how to communicate, how to listen. It was really, really good. So, I think you're going to love this episode. Here we go. What's up, y'all? Hey, if you're a leader, you running a small business, all that kind of stuff, just listen up, okay? Because today I have the Values Vixen here, and she's been on here before. Loved her conversation. Like, I love what we were talking about. We were talking about culture and values and all kinds of things. But I want you to pay attention, right? Because she does a lot of workshops and speaking engagements, and she empowers leaders and their teams to align their day-to-day actions with core values to optimize results. And let's be real. Right now, Lindsay, we are in this place, kind of like a funny place, I think, sometimes in work and business. Everything has changed, cultures change, people are changed, everything's changing. And so I think that it behooves leaders, CEOs to pay attention and to realize that the old ways is not the new way. So welcome to Straight Talk. How are you?
I'm doing just fine, thank you. Just
Good.
just fine like China.
That's awesome. I'm really glad you're here. Been talking a lot to leaders about leadership and CEO and entrepreneurship and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's where I'm really starting to go even more in my podcast because I'm really loving that conversation and the truth of what's happening in the marketplace right now, right? So before we get started, why don't you let us know a little bit more about you and then we're going to go ahead and dive in.
Well, first, yes, thank you for having me again.
Absolutely.
Loved being on your podcast the first time. Super stoked to be back. A little bit about me is, again, I'm Lindsay Harle-Kadatz with BRP Consulting because businesses are people. And a little bit about what I do is I work with leadership teams and their teams to be able to create more engaged organizations, to have
Mhm.
more optimal people performance, and to be able to achieve outcomes that they've set for themselves more easily, more efficiently, more joyfully.
Yeah. That makes me think of I think this is something you talk a lot about, which is core values and uh missions, like their mission. What are they really trying to do, right? And so I think culture has become a really big thing. And that more people, at least the ones I'm speaking to, are really not working for people they're not aligned to anymore in culture. Like I feel like that's changing. Have you felt that?
There, yes, and it's also more about people have come to understand what's more important to them.
Mm,
And even as the generations shift through the workforce, there's different motivators for the different generations from a
mhm,
values
mhm,
perspective, different generational values. Now, one thing that's interesting is, yes, we're talking about leadership and core values and all that jazz. And that does absolutely impact the workplace
mhm,
and with your audience though, it's interesting to note that doing the values work either with yourself, with your team, ultimately trickles out into your personal life. Are
yeah,
you being in
yeah,
alignment with your personal life? And what
yeah,
what what companies are noticing, what all the quiet quitting talk was about a few years back, was simply about people starting to recognize and understand that the values that they were having to abide by during their day were negatively impacting
mm,
their external life, the life that's actually important to them. That's
Mm.
what are they living? Who are they living for? What are they doing outside of work? Because work is an avenue to that. And so, how are we setting up corporations that um, allow individuals to tap into what's important to them, both in the workplace, so that they can thrive and be more connected and resilient outside of the workforce?
Right. Human behavior, right?
Human
Like, just
behavior.
yeah, like, I mean, that's really important, and you're right, I think I mean, even for me, right? Like, I'm an entrepreneur, and I work at home and, I have my business or whatever, but even lately, I've been starting to shift the way I do things, and I realize it's because I wasn't aligning. Things were off, and I couldn't figure that out. And I
Mhm.
think it's the point of, oh, this is what the market world needs. Let me keep doing that, but my values were not aligning. And so I was having this contradiction, right? And it's interesting because it happens in small businesses, it happens in your entrepreneurial journey, it happens in leadership. And you're right. I think a lot of people have looked back and said, "Well, I don't really align with that and it's affecting my life." I that's such a great way to look at things. And human behavior in a workplace is important. And so how are you helping like all of these leaders and small businesses understand that at a deeper level, right? So that they can create a workforce that's maybe more engaged or more high performing. How are you helping them with that?
Well, first, it's well, I mean, obviously, it's dependent upon where's the company at in the first
That's
place.
true. Yeah.
But the biggest part and the biggest type of work I'm doing with the clients I work with is getting everyone simply on the same page as to what the heck their core values actually mean. And not just
Yeah.
what they mean, but what do they look like? What does this type of value look like being expressed in our organization,
Mm.
being expressed consistently throughout the leadership team,
Mhm.
so that they can then model it consistently for their teams. So there's this greater understanding, shared agreed to understanding as to what the heck these seemingly fluffy things actually do, because there's real science behind what the values speak to.
Yeah.
What happened, what a lot of the companies I work with now, what happened during COVID was they realized, hey, we have these really good sound bites in our values, but they're not resonating. They're not actually the beliefs of the individuals
Yep.
that work there, because
Yep.
values are our underlying beliefs upon which we take aligned action. And so it's starting to understand our beliefs are not actually aligned with what our corporate values are stated. So it's having to go back to the drawing board, so to speak, and really get honest and
Yeah.
clear about what really matters to us. And does everybody have ownership over this? Are we co creating them as a collective? Because, well,
Mhm.
our personal values are defined as our underlying beliefs upon which we take aligned action. Corporate values are really our underlying collective beliefs, philosophies, principles upon which we take aligned action to drive business forward. And so it's understanding, is this something that everybody has buy into so that we're moving these things forward?
Mhm.
Because it's still business at the end of the day, and there has to be outcomes, there has to be performance to a degree. Otherwise, the business itself will fail.
Right.
And so,
Right.
what are the quote unquote right values for us? And how is that defined for us? And do we all understand what this looks like? And do we all understand what this looks like in our role and how we
Mhm.
show up in them day in and day out?
Yeah, and I think that's important because a lot of businesses, well, let me just speak from my experience. In the corporate businesses that I've worked in, sometimes the core values were never even looked at anymore or talked about anymore or expressed, right? And we found that a lot of them were outdated
Mhm.
or too complicated to understand. Like
Mhm.
sometimes, like we were at an organization a while back, and I remember we had somebody like yourself come in and look at our things, our core values and all that. And they said, "Can you even recite them?" There was so many words on the core value that we didn't know how to recite them. You
Mhm.
know, it was just a lot of fluff talk and stuff inside of it. And so I totally am with you on this, on what you're saying here, because I think that's important. And so how are you helping them do that? Because you're going to have some resistance, right? Especially if you're dealing with the C-suite or the founder themselves, right? Because they have this vision and this is their vision. And so sometimes, when people come in to talk about that and being honest and having that strategy call, that can be a challenge.
Mhm.
So like how do we incorporate this? I mean, what's the communication tactic that can start to like instantly maybe improve that team alignment,
Mhm.
maybe improve the morale, maybe get that CEO on board? What do you do there? Because tell me, I want to know.
Those are that's a big question,
Yeah.
and they're very different things.
Yeah.
And plain and simple, if a CEO, if an owner is not willing and open to learning where their blind spots may be, it's not gonna work,
Right, right, right.
right? Because at the end of the day, I'm there to facilitate conversation and pull out from their minds so that there's a co-creation in who they become or who they
Right.
say that who they want to
Right.
become. They have to do the work though. I'm not there to do the work for them. I'm there to help guide and influence and just hold up a mirror. And if they don't want to look in that mirror, you can't do anything.
Right, right.
So that's unfortunate, but there has to be that openness and that understanding. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be discomfortable. Discomfortable? You're going to be in discomfort. Let's put it that way, because that's the actual word.
I love it.
Um, but for those who are willing, that then comes down to an open conversation. And what are these open conversations? And getting everybody at the table, because at the end of the day, so it does start with leadership. So
Yeah.
for instance, one of the clients I've worked with, we sat down with the leadership team. We got very clear on, what are their goals here? And the specific goal was to, well, take the brand beyond just the two who founded the company. Right. And that's fair because they wanted more ownership. They were having high turnover. They needed people to be more accountable, all of this jazz. So we were able to understand that. And that's one thing to then, okay, well, now create the values, work those, here you go. But from there is then, now how do we take this to the team? So it's bringing the
Mm,
team together and
mhm.
getting them all in a room at that table to say, here's what they are. Let's talk about this. Because even if we have a clear, short definition, people's interpretations, simply
Yeah.
because of the context that they're bringing to the table,
Yeah.
their experiences in other organizations, could misinterpret it. So it's getting everyone around that table to say, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm seeing, and start to identify, okay, are we aligned or are we misaligned? Do we need to close a gap? Once you're able to understand, okay, well, where is everybody at on this? Is there actual buy-in? Then you can start to really dig in and understand, what are the behaviors behind these values?
Mhm.
What should be modeled? How are we modeling this? As a leadership team, this is how we'll be modeling it, and give
Mhm.
permission to the people to call you out when you're not. And to also, as a leadership team, be vulnerable and saying, here's where I'm at today.
Yeah, yeah. Are you finding that to be a challenge, bringing the leadership together to be able, like, what are the tricks to having that happen cohesively, right? Because I'm thinking of all the people who listen to the show, and I
Mhm.
have a lot of like CEOs and entrepreneurs that listen to the show. I know they're running teams, and I'm just wondering, like, how do we do this effectively, right? Because I love what you're doing. I love that you're bringing them all to the table. You're like, look, we're all human, and we all need to come at this with a vulnerable human state, and this is how we do it. I'm Because I'm thinking of like previous jobs that I've had and the resistance to that, right?
Mhm.
So are you like interviewing people first and then bringing them in, or like how are you modeling that in your business?
Mhm. So Again, big question, dependent upon who the company is and where they're at. Always with that caveat. But yeah, absolutely. I have interviewed, so a lot of the companies I work with are those scale up ones. And so they've gotten to 15, 20 people and they want to grow, but they know that what got them there won't get them
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Fair.
What got them here won't get them there.
Mhm.
And so it's really understanding. And I go in and I interview everybody one on one so that I have data to take to the leadership team to say, here's what I'm hearing, here's some gaps, here's what they're wanting to see, and so on. And then it's also understanding as a leadership team and as a CEO, what is that greater vision? So, how do we
Right.
start to move
Right.
towards that?
Okay.
What are the behaviors? Understanding what are the challenges that you're going to be coming up against, because you're always going to come up against challenges. And so, what are those actions that you can commit to take when you come into challenges?
Girl.
Uh, there's well, and there's also one other thing is this is not one and done work. This
No,
is
I
not
know.
quick 1
Yeah.
month work and you're all good, right? Like I have a year-long program working with leadership teams
That's awesome.
where we're very strategic in moving the needle forward to
Mhm.
be able to achieve whatever outcome they're looking for, but very much it's often has to do with reducing turnover by a specific percentage.
Yeah. I
And
think
that's
and
slow
reducing
work.
turnover, yeah, exactly, and reducing turnover is so important. I just remember the amount of cost it cost me
Yep.
every single time I had to train someone else on my
Mhm.
team, and I'm just like, this has to, yeah, we have to stop this. This is some it's bleeding, you know?
Mhm.
So I did a, like a 360, is it my management style? What can I do better? And it was great. It was so great to hear the feedback because I adjusted accordingly, right?
Mhm.
You have to be open for that. You have to be vulnerable for that.
Yep.
You have to have a right mindset for that because they're not criticizing you. They're just trying to give you like what's not working. And
Mhm.
maybe you can actually change that. But that's not always easy for people, especially in leadership roles, right? I think
Mhm.
another thing we can do better is when somebody is amazing at something, like say sales, how about we don't just throw them into management? You know what I mean? Like, let's find out if they're actually good with that, right? Do you agree with that?
Oh, 1,000%, because not everyone wants to go into management,
Right. Right.
but the thing is that's a path that we're told we should want. And
Right.
so it's understanding, well, what does this who how will this person thrive best in the company? And then it's also, if they do wanna go into management, well, that's not being an expert in sales, say. That's now having to become knowledgeable in how do you manage people? How do
People.
you work
Yeah.
with people? What are
Yeah.
those people's soft skills? How do you influence, not motivate? Because, sorry, you cannot motivate your people, but you can influence them by understanding who they are as individuals and what's important to them on a personal level.
Right.
And that's where a lot of the gap is we do bring these experts in their roles into leadership roles without giving them the proper tools
Yeah.
to be able to
Yeah.
do their job effectively. And one of that is simply helping them understand, number one, you don't have to have the answers. Your job now is to be able to support your people in finding the answers themselves. And it's also understanding that your job as a leader, you'll spend a minimum of 55% of your time listening. So are you
Yeah.
actually, do you know how to listen? And it's
Yeah.
not necessarily active listening, it's deep listening, it's full body listening, it's
Yep.
pausing and even asking, what are we losing when we're not listening? What
Yeah.
opportunities are lost? What people are lost? You know, our employees tell us what they need long before they check out the door.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And even not just even the piece that's missing in the promotional piece, also the fact that sometimes people are not in the right roles.
Yep,
I
yep.
I remember like having someone I worked with who was like a master at like contracts and budgeting and all that kind of stuff, but they had her in a completely different role.
Mhm.
And every time that new role would open, she applied for it and they wouldn't give it to her because they kept her on the other role. And I'm like, no, big mistake, right? So I think that's important too. And I love that you're going in and you're like working with these CEOs. And that's what I want to talk to you about a little bit now. It's like when you walk into an organization, or maybe you can give me a case study. Like
Mhm.
when you walk into an organization, what is your team doing? Like, how do they take them from point A to point B? And I know every organization is different. So if you can use a case study of something that where you saw that transformation, I would love to hear that.
Mhm. So one company I worked with, I was brought in simply because one of the leaders had sent an email out to the entire leadership team that simply said, "This goes against our corporate values." When questioned by the other leaders as to
W-
why,
Right. Or
why?
what are they?
Like,
Right.
okay, why? The leader who had sent it simply said, "It just does." Okay.
Great communication.
Well, that's an indicator that number 1, people don't understand what the values are in a shared way. And then
Yeah.
2, this person, when we have those very emotional reactions of "it just does,"
Yeah.
that's an indicator that it's not the corporate values that are rubbed up against, it's someone's personal values. So in that instance, I went in and I facilitated a workshop that broke down, okay, and it started with, hey, personal values. Like, what are they? Where are they coming from? And it's not that here's a list of values, let's minimize and minimize and minimize to our top ones. It was getting very clear on what are your personal core
Yeah.
values in
Yeah.
definition and what do they look like and what was discovered. And I didn't start the whole thing by saying, hey, I was brought in because of this email. That was it was more, we're here to really get on the same page and understand what are the corporate values. Are these still the corporate values, as it was a new leadership team? The values
Ah,
themselves had been formed 8 years prior. Only
right.
two of the people who had done them were still on the team. Right. So, and it wasn't the individual who had sent the email. So, but it started with getting clear on what are personal values? Where are we reacting from? How do we become a little bit more knowledgeable of when we get that moment, we can step
Yeah.
out. And we uncovered, that this individual was acting from one of their primary core values of security, right? And
Mm.
so the specific incident threatened this individual's personal value of security for providing for their family.
Ah, okay.
Very different,
Yeah.
right? Um, and when we had that conversation, not around specifically pointing fingers at them, but we were able to then move into the corporate values and work through, are these still the right ones? How do we do this? What are the definitions? What are the actions?
I
And from
love
that,
that.
they then went through into their company, and the leadership team themselves were able to model what these actually looked like a lot better. And they had quite a large success for 8 months in modeling these and taking these things forwards. And then, now the world has
Mhm.
thrown some things at us, and their company in particular, that they've had a few hiccups, but they've now come back. And because I have a follow up process and have kept in communication with them, um, to now go back to your values, because these high stress situations
Yeah.
that have happened aren't going to stop happening. So, how do we come back to these and start moving through them again? And where did we maybe misstep? Because again, human. And so it was a beautiful opportunity to just start to rework and go back to their roots, go back to their basics, and start moving forward together again. And that's what they're doing now.
I love it. I love it. So what are what are the if you can take a startup or a small organization right now. I know you work with small business. So if there's a startup, how do they do this from the get? Right? Like how can they like actually start to um really do these core values here in their business so that they can grow in a positive way, because this is one thing I've been finding, and you've probably been finding some of this too, is that some of them don't even have values. Like
Mhm.
they don't even have the values written down. It was just the vision of the CEO and starter, and we're just all going to follow. But then, the human behavior in the workplace comes in at some point, right? So give them like some strategies that they can start to implement to really just get this from the beginning.
Mhm. And I wouldn't say you need to sit down and get your values all hunkered out right in the beginning, um, because that comes from how do you feel aligned as a group,
Yeah.
and that does take time. What I would say is start to build a how do we operate around here? How do we treat people? How do we make decisions? What makes decisions easier for us in challenging times? Um, and 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 what's funny is as I mentioned, I do work with scale ups, and that's because the company themselves started, we've got our values, we've got our vision, we're good to go, and then they haven't been intentional in growing the culture with them. And so now they're starting to, but they've grown great because they had this understanding of this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing, this is how we're doing. And now we've got more people, and now we need to be more intentional because we're starting to see gaps in the in communication, in satisfaction levels and disengagement levels. Those are starting to grow. And so it's really taking that step back and understanding a few things of, okay, well, what is the model of our company that we're wanting to work with? Are we
Mhm.
wanting a flat company, um, structure wise, or are we wanting that more traditional structure? Because some people will thrive in one and others will thrive in another. That will then also inform the values that you create,
Right. Right.
and the leadership that you attract, and the employees that you attract, and the career paths that you build out within your organization. And so it's not necessarily, well, we've got to get our vision, our mission, our values, that all in place before we start.
Mm.
It's absolutely understand why you're starting your business, start to understand how you're wanting to possibly grow it within a structure format, start to understand, as you, as the founder, what is important to you? What are your own personal values? And, so for me, I'm a soulpreneur. I know my personal values and how they relate in my own personal life, and I understand how they operate within my business. So
Right.
I'm not separating my values, but I'm separating the definitions just slightly based on how I express them
Okay.
in
Okay.
personal, in business.
Right.
So it is getting clarity on becoming your own self-aware individual and understand how, because this is often what a lot of companies forget is we've got to get these values in place for the company, but we don't do our own work in understanding, well, what are our own personal values first?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Because that will greatly inform the overarching feel and culture that you as leader will be bringing into the
So
organization.
true. So true.
And
Yeah.
then you can go deeper into, okay, now that I understand who I am, I'm self aware on what's important to me in my values and how I operate and what will trigger my emotions. We can start to come together as a collective and begin these conversations as a collective to
Mhm.
build our values, our guiding principles, our underlying beliefs upon which we can take action to drive business forward.
Right. Now, the kind of work that you do you think that it's important to um call someone like you to come in prior to that email being sent? Are there like flags that people should be looking at in their organization to say, I think I think we need a specialist to come in here and talk to us about this. Do you have like, okay, this has gone really too far, or you should have, maybe you should call us when it's doing this.
I mean, yeah, call me ahead of time, period.
Right.
But the reality is, people don't fix things that aren't broken, and we don't know they're broken until something happens,
Yeah.
right? And
What's an indicator? What would be some indicators?
yeah, great question. So there's those miscommunications on the teams. You're starting to feel a little more friction between your employees.
Mhm.
Those stronger personalities maybe are taking over, and you notice other individuals on your team starting to shrink a little bit more, disengaging a little bit more,
Mm,
not performing quite to the level that you know that they can or that they previously used to. The employee experience
okay.
has gone down. Your leaders are burnt out and overwhelmed and just checking out almost and not really understanding what they need to do as a leader to be able to support their team properly.
Mhm.
So there absolutely are indicators, and it's even one thing is, are you having too many meetings of the same
Girl.
meeting?
Girl.
Is are you repeating the same things over and over
Oh
and
my
over
god.
again?
We used to complain about that all the time. We were having meetings about the meeting, and I'm
Yep,
like, "Why am I going to another meeting? I've like
yep,
we've had 20 meetings about
yeah,
this meeting." Yeah,
yep.
it's very frustrating.
When you get clear on when you're all on that same page with a shared understanding, there's a stat that you can save up to like 300 hours a year
Wow.
in meeting time.
Wow.
And so that translates to roughly 2 to 3 hours per employee. And so
Right.
what could you do with 2 to 3 hours extra as an employee
Right, right, right.
without having to go to this meeting that should have been an email, or this meeting that shouldn't have been because we should have we sh- I shouldn't should I shouldn't should because because we're not listening properly. We're not understanding how to effectively listen.
Right, right,
And
right.
so those are a lot of the indicators is, are you speaking and saying you're listening, or are you just having the same conversation over and over? Are
Yeah.
people irked behind your back? And you may not know that, but you know that. You
Yeah.
get the feel in the air in the office, right?
Yeah.
And this is going in another direction as well, but more companies are requiring their people to come back to work at
I was
least for a
just gonna
few,
talk to you about that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
at least for a little bit during the
yeah,
week. And I do not disagree with that. I see huge value in
yeah.
bringing people together,
Me too.
but let people know why.
Yeah,
And it's not to have a pizza party. And right? Like, it's not to just show up and have special events and team events to just rah, rah, rah. But
yeah,
like, there's a real reason, and it's to build that collective community, because you're in business is a community.
yeah,
And so how do you get this community um, to collaborate, to speak more kindly and effectively to one another?
yeah,
How do you start to understand what makes every single individual tick? Because that's important,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So I don't disagree with hybrid and requiring people to come back, but explain why, because it does take away from some of the very valuable things that we gained during COVID from remote work.
yeah. That's true. That's very true. And I think some people are having a really hard time with that, right?
Mhm,
And I think you're right. I think if there's a clear communication as to this is why this is important, maybe that person would be able to go, I get that. I actually understand that, right? As
mhm.
opposed to just come, I said so,
Yep,
that's it, you
yep,
know? And some people are being spoken to that way because I
yeah,
spoke to some people who are just saying, nope, my boss said you're coming and that's it. And I told him, "Well, since the pandemic, you told me I was gonna be 100% remote, so I moved, like, 3 hours away. Not my problem."
yep, yep.
Wow. You know what I mean? Like, don't treat people like that either, right? That there's a way to do this,
Mhm,
whether it's, giving them a stipend so they can stay for 2 days in a hotel or something, but don't just, "Well, too bad." That person's driving 3 hours to you and 3 hours back, the least you can have is some compassion.
mhm,
Right, and some
mhm,
humanity, and so that was just someone I was speaking to, but it was just like, okay, I was gonna ask you about how, what you were seeing in the workforce when it came to that coming back, because I believe you're in Canada, right?
I am.
Yeah, so are you also is Canada also doing that where people are coming back to work more, or are you referring more to the US?
I'm referring to all over. It's very
Yeah.
similar up here as
Oh, it is?
well,
Okay.
right? With regards to that, some companies are absolutely demanding their people be back. Others are more flexible.
Yeah,
For instance, my husband, his workplace has, you can work from home if you want.
okay.
However, he chooses to go and work from the office most days most days because he
Right.
loves to be around the people. And
Yeah.
what the company started to notice as well is because he was there and the personality that he was bringing, other people were choosing to come into the office and
That's
be in the
awesome.
office
Yeah.
and work together, right? Now he's home almost every Friday, which is good. Um, I think we could have lunch together and
Right.
little moments, but he doesn't feel obligated to go into the office.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a
that's good.
choice,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, and also, I think that energy being around other people you work with is good. It's productive. It can be productive
Mhm, mhm,
than to be home, right? Sometimes when you're home, you'll either overwork or
mhm,
you don't want to work at all. But
mhm.
when you're in the office, it's like, it's a different energy about that. I used to like going in, actually. I loved it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and, well, this isn't necessarily per, like, the corporate world. I know, there are stories from, like, writers, TV writers, television writers, movie writers, all of that, where there's like, a group of writers for a television show, and they found it very difficult during COVID to really bounce ideas off of one another
Um, yeah.
because that was part of the room energy that they had when they were
Yeah.
building scripts, and then they could go off into their groups based on what was assigned to them, and then they would come back and again right? And that's just not quite the same
Right.
over a screen. Now, there are ways to build really connected experiences. And I obtained some facilitation training from the Exchange Network out of the States. Excellent training on how do you create these more collective community building experiences online, which has been incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
But there's still nothing quite the same as being in a room with people,
Yes, so
being and
true.
feeling that energy, that collective connected energy, because at the end of the day, we are still human, and humans, as you know, are hardwired for connection.
Connection. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's beautiful. I love the work that you're doing. I wish that more companies would open their doors to things like this because
Mhm,
I think they are. Maybe they are. I think before they weren't.
mhm,
It was one of those things like, oh, they're an outsider, they're going to come in and ruin everything. That used to be the mentality and the behavior. And maybe in the last, I don't know, maybe since COVID, I think things have shifted because people, as you know, were going through that quiet quitting stage.
mhm,
Women were leaving corporate in droves. They wanted to start their own thing and wanted to be home with the family after COVID. They were like, I'm not doing it. And so I think things are shifting a little bit more now. Maybe you're seeing a different pattern of things happening. I feel like people are now wanting to just align themselves with the corporate values and align themselves with a place they want to go to work for every
mhm,
day. At
mhm,
least that's
mhm.
what I'm noticing with the conversations I'm having. So if somebody wants to have you come in and kind of help them out or evaluate them and all that, how do they get in contact with you? How do they see the work that you're doing? Give us all of that information.
Yeah, so they can find me on my website at brpconsulting.ca, or simply connect with me on LinkedIn, Lindsay Harle-Kadatz. Um, I have a big smile in my photo and a big teal fringe on my head. So, and really, it's just let's have a conversation, because it's not about coming in and fixing. It's
Yeah.
about building on what's already good,
Yeah.
because chances are you already have something really good. And
Yeah.
so let's continue to build that and then close the gap between where you say you want to be and where you actually are by tapping into what's awesome about you, by tapping into what your people are really feeling without consequences.
Yeah. That's
And I think,
important.
and that's a
Yeah.
big thing, is if you're going
Yeah.
to be asking people to give feedback, even if it's anonymously presented via me, it's still important then that you don't retaliate.
Yeah.
Say, "Well, screw this. This is just BS. I
Yeah.
don't believe in it." Well, okay, well then it's all for nothing. You're not gonna have any change.
No. And you won't have growth either, because that really does stop your growth. If you
Yep,
can't be a people person, and what I mean by that is just respect others
yep,
and listen and be there, you're going to be on this island by your damn self. Because eventually people get tired. They do.
mhm,
And I've seen that happen to businesses, and I've seen people just jump ship. They're like, forget it. you know? And so I encourage all of you who are listening to Lindsay today to just, take a pause. This is not to be against you, right? That's a personal feeling that you have to deal with because that's not what it's about. It's about the people that are surrounding you and are in your company, your business, under your leadership, that they really are showing up every day because they want to contribute and do something. They really do. It's not always for the paycheck. It is lots of times, at least it was for me, for the value that I was putting out in the world through this organization, right? And so if you guys are like really connecting with what Lindsay's saying, and you're like, maybe we need a evaluation. We're having friction, or before we even get there, let's see if we're even aligned. I highly recommend somebody like Lindsay because I love her attitude. I like her mind. I like the way she thinks. I love what she puts out in the world. And I really want you guys to connect with her. So, Lindsay, thank you for being here. I like talking about this kind of stuff. I think it's important. And I think the more we can bring this out to people's awareness, especially those who are in the driver's seat,
Yeah.
right? The more we can do that and help them out, the better the world will be. And the more there's open for other people to work. You know what I'm saying? There's more work, there's more things out there because businesses are thriving. That's what we want at the end of
Mhm.
the day. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you.
No, thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff. I have like 10,000 other things. I'm like, oh, let's go this route, but recognizing the time of your busy listeners, right?
Well, we could always do it again if you have
Oh,
another like direction you
yeah.
want to take us. So thank you so much for being here.
No,
Seriously, that was awesome. Thank
thank you,
you.
Neena.
Guys, thank you for hanging out with me and Lindsay. Now, I know that I speak to a lot of you who are CEOs and are like leaders, and a lot of you are entrepreneurs and you're building your teams. This is important. So I want you to pay attention, listen up. And if you have to rewind, go ahead and rewind. She left a lot of gems there for you. It's really important that you guys start to listen and communicate with the people that you're working with, because I know for me, when I felt that it came to an end, I left. Right. And I was in that organization for many, many years and love them still. But I had no more growth, no more room for expansion. I felt like we weren't being listened to, all that kind of stuff. So, I don't want that to happen to anyone else, because when you have someone who is dependable, reliable, values driven, and wants to be there, keep those people around, y'all, because it is expensive to keep a rotating door in your business. So thank you guys for hanging out with me and Lindsay today. I love you guys so much. This is Neena Perez. Straight talk, no sugar added. Until next time.